What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Optimal presented by FTN Network. We're here on a Monday. Pretty good weekend for me this week, so hopefully we can talk about some of the stuff that went right for us at FTN Daily, talk about Week 9 a little bit. What we're going to do on today's show is we're going to kind of talk about Week 9 from a recap perspective, review that, talk about some top plays, look at the optimal lineup, talk about things that went right, and all that good stuff. But we're also going to take a look at Monday Night Football, take a quick look at that, see maybe some of our favorite plays for the night. Hopefully, we're gonna have a pretty interesting game on our hands here. But I'm not too not too optimistic with the two teams that are playing here with the Bears and the Steelers. I don't think it's going to be a very pretty game, but hopefully we can have a good one and an entertaining one for us tonight. Then we'll take a little bit of look if we have some time at the end. We'll take a quick look at the Monday night action on the NBA side as well. I believe it's a 8 or 9 game slate, I believe. So those are the three things that we're going to be doing on today's show. Appreciate you guys all tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, throw those in the chat at any time, and we will answer those. Talk about that on the stream live. If you put in your comment or your chat on Twitch or YouTube, I can filter them up to the site directly. So I would recommend doing that. That way, we can kind of have some conversations about whatever topic we're kind of working with here. But before things get started, let's run the intro.
Every day, DFS players set out in search of the perfect lineup.
Great Scott!
To help you craft the best lineup in the land, FTN's Kyle Murray is here to take you through one of the most powerful tools in the DFS world.
That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
It's The Optimal with Kyle Murray.
All right, let's dive right into it. First of all, we got to start off with these comments here. Brandon said he has a comment for us, and it's Devonta Smith. I mean, Brandon, that's 2 weeks in a row. Now you're setting yourself some expectations here. So tomorrow, either today or tomorrow, we're going to need another wide receiver pick from you because that's 2 weeks in a row now. Devonta Smith, big game this week. He called him. I believe it was on. Was it Friday was it on Friday that you called him, Brandon, or was it another early pick? But 2 weeks ago, he called Tyler Lockett on on a Monday or something, or on a Tuesday. So it looks like you are setting yourself some expectations here, Brandon. We expect these wide receiver picks now. So looking forward to who you got this week. No pressure. It doesn't need to be today. But throughout this week, if I don't get a wide receiver pick, I think not only myself, but some of the viewers are going to be fairly disappointed in you. So much like the Padres fans were disappointed in your pads this year. Sorry for that. But had to throw a shot in there since you've been killing all the wide receiver calls. So shout out to you for that. I actually did have Devonta Smith in a Justin Herbert stack. So that lineup, I think it cashed fine, but it wasn't my best lineup of the week. But overall, yeah, Devonta Smith was great. That touchdown that he scored was a nice little score there. Hey, Kyle, can you use Optimum and build a few showdown lineups for Monday Night Football using a few rules and combos? Yeah, I will do that for sure. I'm going to do the Week 9 recap first, and then we'll hop over to Monday Night Football. So if that's all right, stick around for that. Probably in about, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes or so is when we will do that, if that's cool with you, Eric. But I appreciate you being here, tuning in, and I will definitely do that. All right. So let's talk about Week 9. Week 9 for me was pretty solid. Nothing special, nothing too exciting, but it was a good bounce back from what were 3 or 4 weeks of just pretty bad stretches, right? So basically, I ran a few lineups with some of my top quarterbacks of the week, like Justin Herbert, like I mentioned, Lamar Jackson. I think that my Lamar Jackson lineup was actually my best lineup. Was able to let me go look real quick. I think I used Lamar Jackson with Hollywood Brown, which that was that outcome for Hollywood Brown. That's probably the best case scenario there for him in the last like 2 minutes or so plus overtime. It could not have gotten much better there. So, all right, it was Lamar Jackson, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Jamar Chase, Hollywood Brown, Brandon Ayuk, Amari Cooper, and Alberto. Alberto was actually pretty solid, and then he got hurt. I'm not sure if he ended up coming back in, but he was very chalky. But, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Jamar Chase, Brandon Ayuk, all fairly contrarian. So it was okay eating the chalk with guys like Cooper and Alberto. But overall, not a bad week there. Lamar, Chubb, Cook, Hollywood was my quarterback. Yeah, I mean those guys are all in my lineup right there. It was kind of a bummer that a lot of my lineups where I had Chubb, I paired him up with Jamar Chase because I really did like Chase. I probably could have done something a little bit better and maybe paired him up with T. Higgins. Obviously, T. Higgins had the better game, but I mean, Jamar Chase had the opportunity. He dropped a couple long passes there. He fumbled, so I mean, he could have definitely had a better game. And I think it was a good game script, so it just didn't quite fall our way. T. Higgins should have scored too. He should have caught that touchdown. Cooper hurt, yeah. Mark Cooper definitely was a letdown there. I mean, he started off good. I think he had 5 points in the first quarter because he had that long 30-yard catch and run. So yeah, had some Higgins and Mixon. Wish I had Connor. Yeah, Connor was that guy yesterday. Apparently, man. What was it? 3 touchdowns, 40 plus points. I don't know if he got to 40 on DraftKings actually. Yeah, 40.3 led the slate. He was in this contest I'm looking at right now, 0.6% owned. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, Connor, that guy just can't stop finding the end zone. It's like he can't stop finding it. It's wild. But all right, let's hop into the optimizer here. Take a look at some of the top scores. We can recap it there. Sorry, just getting the graphics set up here. All right, on to the optimizer. All right, so here we are. On the main slate, taking a look at some of the top scores. Let's take a look at the quarterbacks first. Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, really strong options. I was pretty high on both of those guys, so I was happy with those performances. Matt Ryan, he had a big one. Matt Ryan, Jimmy G, wasn't really expecting big games from them. Teddy Bridgewater was someone that was projecting pretty well for me, and he was solid. But if I believe, if I'm correct, Cortland Sutton didn't do much. Jerry Jeudy was fine, but Tim Patrick was the big producer for the Broncos pass catchers there. Kirk Cousins had a big game, but it was kind of a strange big game to where he didn't really do a whole lot. But the first drive of the game, he threw a 50-yard touchdown to Justin Jefferson, and then he had a rushing touchdown. So he only threw for 185 yards and still had that kind of production. So that was pretty random, pretty weird. But if you rostered Cousins, he got there for sure. Other than that, quarterback was pretty bad. It was clear that if you got to Herbert or Jackson or Matt Ryan, I guess, you did have a clear advantage on the field because after that, the next best was Jimmy Garoppolo, and he was probably under 1% owned, I would guess. I mean, I would guess Matt Ryan was probably around there too. But so basically, if you played Jackson or Herbert, you're probably at a pretty distinct advantage just because of how much they outscored everybody else, as well as the fact that, you scroll down here a little bit, Jalen Hurts was pretty bad, 16 points. Allen was terrible, 12 fantasy points. So a lot of these guys that people got to, Burrow, Mahomes, even Tyrod Taylor was, getting some ownership. Those guys all busted so bad. Even Jordan Love. I mean, it was just a really bad week at quarterback, honestly. So if you played Herbert or Jackson, that's probably made for a pretty significant advantage there. Jackson was 60% owned in cash. Wow, was he really? Huh. I guess it's not that surprising. It's just kind of strange that quarterback gets that ownership. I mean, I guess in cash, it makes sense. I definitely think he probably was the best cash play. Do you know what Jordan Love's ownership in cash was? I'm curious. I think someone asked a question last week. Who was the better play in tournaments? No, sorry. Who was the better play in cash? Josh Allen or Jordan Love? And I think I said Jordan Love. So that probably ended up getting more lucky than not. But I mean, they scored the same amount of points. So it was just a very weird outcome. Let me zoom in a little bit here, actually. All right. Let me know if that's good on the screen. But anyway, so yeah, quarterback was just strange because we had so many busts and that was just kind of a weird scenario at quarterback where if you played Jackson or Herbert, you were just instantly ahead of the field. So that was a huge leg up if you were able to get those guys. But on to running backs now. James Conner at the top, obviously, like we just mentioned. Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, Cordell Patterson, Alvin Kamara. That was the top 5. I wouldn't say any weird names. I mean, Cordell Patterson was getting pretty popular. James Conner was probably out. James Conner was definitely a weird name, but I mean, this guy's been scoring touchdowns all season. I don't think it was necessarily weird that he had a good game. I think it was just strange that he had that kind of game where he was so productive, not only on the ground but through the air as well. So, yeah, James Conner being the top scorer was definitely a surprise there. But overall, running back kind of shaked out in a fairly normal manner. Gaskin was fine; he was a pretty popular value option. But I did notice that in some of the smaller field stuff, he didn't really get that popular. Um, I think in one contest, he was like 12% owned or something, 12 or 14%, one of those two numbers. So that was pretty low, lower than I thought he would be. Love was exactly 5% owned. That's interesting. I would wonder what he was like in like a, I don't know, a high stakes double up. I would assume it would have been higher, but I don't know. People might have just been off of him in general. But I do know a lot of people that were on Love, so that's pretty interesting to kind of think about there. But other running backs here, Devonta Freeman, he scored through the air actually, so that was a nice little addition there for Lamar Jackson, where we talked about. We talked about this last week with Lamar kind of getting vultured the way Jalen Hurts did last week. Lamar in that big game against the Chargers where the running back scored all these touchdowns. We had a fullback and a running back score for Baltimore, but they were both through the air, so it helped Lamar. But if you're like saying, I don't know, stacking Andrews or something like that, you probably got left out. Bateman was fine. Hollywood obviously got there eventually, but it took him a little while. He was kind of just doing nothing until the end of the fourth quarter, made a couple of big plays and then overtime, obviously. So obviously you're happy with it, but very strange there. Jordan Howard found the end zone again. Just trying to see if we had any busts here. Eckler was a pretty significant bust. He was a very strong play in my opinion, and just didn't really get the job done. Aaron Jones was a bust. That was unfortunate. He was just shut down the whole game. And he wasn't involved in the passing game either, which was a surprise and also very unfortunate there. But overall, top plays at running back: Connor, Chubb, Mixon, Patterson, Kamara. Kind of made sense there, except for outside of Connor, a lot of those guys made a lot of sense. Devonta Smith was the highest scoring wide receiver of the week. Shout out to Brandon. There we go. Devonta Smith at the top. You called it. Big game there. But, I mean, he had a big game. And obviously at 5,200 when he's the top scorer, you definitely really like him in your lineup. But we didn't have a big week of scoring from receivers. Nobody over 30. So kind of a low-scoring week. Keenan Allen was very good. Hollywood Brown ended up being the third highest scoring receiver on the board after really not doing anything. So that was interesting. Zacchaeus got there, scored twice in the red zone, I think, both times too. Ayuk had a big game. He found the end zone, had 89 yards. I thought that he was going to get the 100-yard bonus at the end there too. That would have been very nice. Patrick scored twice, I believe. Jefferson with a long touchdown. DPJ had a long touchdown. So, wide receiver, just kind of a low-scoring week at wide receiver. So if you were able to get to one of these cheaper guys that were up at the top, Hollywood, Keenan Allen, Devonta Smith, even Ayuk, that probably went a very long way just because so many of the top guys, Diggs, 14, I would consider that a bust, even though probably didn't kill you just based on the way everyone else scored. But like Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, Mike Williams, Tyreek Hill, like those guys, obviously when they're getting doubled up and tripled up by guys like Smith and Allen and Hollywood Brown, it's going to give you a significant advantage with those guys there. As for tight end, George Kittle looked amazing in his first game back. Shout out to Magic Sports Guy, our fearless leader, Kevin. He was all over George Kittle. Travis Kelce had a decent game. He wasn't really Kelce-like, but he hasn't really been Kelce-like much all year. So 17, not bad. But, just look how bad the tight end position shook out. If you had Kittle, you obviously had a very significant advantage on the field, right? He was, the third best point per dollar play on the board, and also was the only player over 20. There was only one of two over 15, but he was almost $2,000 cheaper than the only other guy that was over 15. So obviously he gave you a significant step up, But look at this right here. 3 Chargers tight ends over 10. Wow. That is funny. I didn't even realize that. That's very funny, actually. Um, Anderson had a couple of big plays. Parham scored. I think Cook scored as well. Dan Arnold was good once again. So but here's just like the thing with tight end. It's if you're not correlating tight end position or spending up for like these elite tight ends, which early on in the year I thought there would be an advantage to going out of your way to spend up at tight end, which it kind of would have worked this week if you did that with Kittle, for example, but not necessarily for someone like Kelsey. But for example, if you're going out of your way to spend up for these guys here who are, you know, so clearly favored in terms of having higher ceilings than other players like Parham, like these guys. I'm not even talking about those guys. I'm talking about guys like Jared Cook, Dan Arnold, Ty Conklin, like those guys who have they're realistic plays, but they don't really have significant ceilings. Like Kittle, Kelsey on this particular slate, Waller, Pitts, like those guys kind of have unmatched ceilings compared to other tight ends. So if you weren't going to play that tier, you definitely want to either correlate it or just save as much salary as you can. That's why I did play the chalky Albert O, who didn't really pan out, but again, like he was still, a top 15 probably. Top 20. So obviously that's not great, and it definitely didn't help anybody win anything. But tight end was just so bad, and it's just been so bad like the past 3 or 4 weeks. So finding this top scorer is going to be important. And like last week, or even this week with Kyle Pitts, but like last week, I thought Kyle Pitts could be, the George Kittle-esque play where he does have a significant ceiling at whatever price, but the field's not really getting to him because they either want to pay up for the Kelsey or the Waller, or they're going to just punt the position. So while when you look at projected ownership, Albert O, Goddard, Gesicki, Dan Arnold was up there, Jared Cook was up there. When so many people are kind of reaching for these cheaper tight ends, if you can surpass that and pay up for somebody with some ceiling, obviously it's not going to work if you do that with, like, I don't know, Mark Andrews, for example, and he scores 9 points, or Kyle Pitts and he scores 9 points. But if you get Kyle Pitts at 6%, like we know that Kyle Pitts can go for 30. We've seen it twice already this year. So I do think that there's still a unique advantage there at tight end. I think it's just a matter of how you approach it, whether if you're playing that position for someone with a ceiling, like a Kelsey, like a Waller, like a Pitts, a Kittle, those kinds of caliber tight ends, or if you wanted to play it with, correlation or some sort of value. I think that's the two routes for tight end. I still think that's kind of the way to go. I do want to touch on defense because defense was a bit strange where the Chiefs were super popular. They were at actually 17 points up until that last minute Lazard touchdown, which knocked them off 6 points down to 11. So that obviously helped if you faded that chalk. But just look at all the other teams in this range. And I actually fell for, the Chiefs play in a couple of lineups. But it wasn't something that I was like proud of or wanted to do. But just look at all the other options here. Like if you just fell on the Jags because they're just cheap, you got 17. If you just fell into the Vikings because they were cheap, 12. So like there's just so many ways that defense is just so random. Like the Vikings defense wasn't even that good, but they just returned the kick for a touchdown and had a couple of picks, and they were fine. The Browns defense was good. People weren't really getting to them either. So again, like defense is just super, super random, super wild. And I wouldn't recommend spending up a ton at defense still. I think that point still stands. But let's see here. A big reason why I cashed in double ups was pairing Hollywood and Lamar. Is pairing a quarterback with the wide receiver recommended for cash lineups, or did I get lucky? I would still recommend it. I know some people say you don't have to do it, and I think that is true. But it's the same thing, right? Obviously, it's going to change slate by slate. And for I guess a little prerequisite, I don't really play a lot of cash, so I don't really have like a ton of personal experience with doing this. But so just thinking about it theoretically, it's the same concept of just trying to find the most optimal plays, right? And if you're playing a quarterback, especially someone that, I guess Lamar might be a little bit different because he has that kind of rushing upside. But like, let's say you're playing, I don't know, Justin Herbert in cash this week. That's who you were playing. I think pairing him with the receiver makes a ton of sense. I mean, sure, Keenan Allen probably would have just been someone that you could get in there regardless if it was a quarterback was. But, I don't think you need to say, oh, I can't pair a quarterback with a wide receiver in cash just because it's cash. I still think that you're trying to knock down as many dominoes as you can and by dominoes, I mean hitting those plays, hitting as many positions and as many plays and getting them correct as possible. And if you can knock down two dominoes with one, and that with that being the stack, I think it still makes a ton of sense. So I don't think you got lucky. I think that was totally fine. But all right, let's see here. Let's take a look at the optimal lineup real quick. I want to see what it was this week. Whoops. All right. Lamar Jackson, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Zacchaeus, Keenan Allen, Devonta Smith, George Kittle, Mr. James Conner himself, and the Jags. So a couple of weird plays, but also a couple of fairly popular plays. Keenan Allen was popular. Nick Chubb was decently popular, actually more popular than I thought he would be. I think that he was a very strong play and just got a little bit more popular than I thought. Mixon was fine, 11%. Lamar Jackson, 17%. So a couple of weird plays, Zacchaeus, James Conner. George Kittle being 2% projected ownership. I'm not sure where he landed, but I'm pretty confident it didn't really get all that high. So, I think that he was one of the better plays of the week. Just got a tweet from our guy, Matthew Davis. He said, shout out to you. I won 1,200 in week 9 building lineups off your model while tailgating at the 49ers game. I love that, man. Congrats. That's awesome. Nothing like building lineups while you're on the go or something and being out with friends or doing whatever and then being able to kind of follow along with having a good lineup. That's a very fun experience. So shout out to you, Matty Wood. That's a good week right there. Nothing like quick 1,200 while tailgating. Love to see that. Appreciate everybody on Twitter. We're getting a lot of replies in there. If you guys have any comments or questions or just want to chat about certain things, throw them in the chat section on YouTube or on Twitch. I can throw those on the screen if you comment on one of those platforms. If you're on Twitter, I'll try to follow along, but I'm typically better off at following them on one of the two sites between YouTube and Twitch, because that way I can throw them directly on the screen for everybody. But I do appreciate everyone for watching. Appreciate you tuning in. I'll try to follow along on Twitter right now as well. But all right, let's hop into the Monday Night Football stuff. Taking a look at it here. We already had the optimizer pulled up. Don't know why I did that. But all right. Chicago and Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh. Should be a blast. Don't have the ownership in yet. Let me see if that's ready to go from Alex. Shout out to our guy Alex, who does the single game ownership. They've been killing it. They've been great. And they help a lot too. Like if you're someone like me who just wants to build lineups based on particular upside and stuff like that. Showdown, like for me, Showdown's kind of a lottery, right? Like you're playing on certain data points and certain thoughts and all that stuff. But after that, it's kind of a lottery. So I would recommend using the ownership to build your best possible lines. But all right, our guy Eric wanted me to run through some rules here. So first of all, Eric, if you have any rules that you want to touch on directly, throw them in there and we'll work through them on the stream. If anybody has any rules or anything that they want to talk about for tonight's Monday Night Football contest, throw those in the chat. We'll walk through those directly here. But all right, let's take a look at the quarterback stacks. So for example, on a slate like this where you're considering playing a quarterback in the flex or in the captain or MVP spot, we're going to talk about it based on if you're playing a quarterback in your captain or MVP spot. Let's talk about first Ben Roethlisberger. So Big Ben, if you're rostering him, first of all, close your eyes. That guy's been brutal to watch this year. However, if you're rostering him, you're going to want to pair him with some pass catchers, right? Now, the question always is how many pass catchers and which ones do you want to include? So for Showdown, so for a main slate, it's typically one or two. I don't really ever like to stack three. For Showdown, it's usually no less than two. You can do more. You can do 3 if you want, but for me, I stick with no less than 2 for showdown just to say, "Okay, I'm automatically going to have 2 players stacked up with Ben Roethlisberger if he's captain or MVP, depending on what site you're on, no matter what." So now you have to kinda decipher who you want to pair him with. Now there's a couple things that you can use here to do so. You can use projections. You can use some of the stats that we have at FTN Daily. I like to look at target share, total targets, all that stuff. But sometimes you have to think a little bit outside the box when thinking about showdown slates. So let's run through some of the projections here. Take a look at the flex plays, running backs and wide receivers. So for now, assuming that Montgomery is going to be potentially active. The projections will update, but we're looking at just Pittsburgh guys for now. Najee Harris, 19-point projection. He's totally in play and pairing him with Big Ben. He's had a ton of work in the passing game. That's totally fine. Deontay, Claypool, James Washington. I think all 3 of those guys are in play. Washington doesn't have a great projection right now, but if he's going to be the number 3 receiver in the offense, he's definitely in play in some degree, right? We can go back and look at some of the target share stuff for the Pittsburgh guys here. We'll do that. We'll do that in a little bit, but I'm going to assume that those 3 wide receivers, Freiermuth, even Gentry, I think is okay. So let's go Deontay, Claypool, Najee, Freiermuth. So like those would be like the 4 main guys I would for sure want to stack with Big Ben. There's a couple other things that you can kind of do here, and that would be to either look through the target shares to see if there's any ancillary secondary type plays that you'd want to add in there. For example, someone like James Washington, I think he's going to be in there. Ray McLeod, I think he can be fine. So right now, those are probably the main pieces. So it's 6 guys that I'm going to be wanting to pair with Big Ben. Now, for the most part, these lineups are going to work in terms of they're trying to force in the best possible play. So it's going to be Deontay, Najee, Claypool, Freiermuth that are getting the most exposure anyway. But if you're looking to build 150 lineups, and if you're talking about lineups with Ben Roethlisberger in the captain spot, Ray McLeod as a punt play, even Gentry, I think like those guys are definitely fine. But also, if you wanted to just roll with those main 4, Deontay, Claypool, Harris, Freiermuth, I think that's totally fine as well. After seeing what the Steelers did to the Browns, how confident are you in the Steelers tonight? I am top 100 for 60K Survivor and took them this weekend. I have Rams, Bills, Cowboys, Bucks, Chargers, and Ravens. If you wanted a scale of like 1 to 10, I would probably give it like a 7, 7.5. I think the Steelers win. And I think they win pretty. The thing is, I just don't feel confident in their offense, but their defense is very good, and I don't feel that confident in Chicago. But Chicago, maybe they took some steps. I don't know. But for me, I would say probably 7 out of 10. So hopefully that settles your mind a little bit there, Josh. But all right, let's take a look at the Chicago stacks, because I do think Chicago stacks are going to work a little bit different. So first of all, clear everybody out here. So Justin Fields. So now I would say Justin Fields is a little bit different. He can run. He can get the job done on the ground. Ben Roethlisberger, if he runs, he's probably going to fall over and hurt something. So Justin Fields is definitely the guy that is going to potentially have some more upside on his own. All of Ben Roethlisberger's ceiling is attached to his pass catchers because he's not going to do anything on the ground. If he gets a rushing touchdown or does anything on the ground, then I guess I'm wrong. But we're not going to see that, right? Fields is different. So I don't think you necessarily need to consider stacking him with so many other options. Like we listed 6 players with Big Ben. And that the reason why that is because if Big Ben is going to have a ceiling game to where he pays off in the captain or MVP spot, he's probably throwing 3 or 4 touchdowns. Now, is it possible that Deontay, Claypool, Najee, and Freiermuth account for all 4 of those touchdowns? Yes, that's obviously very possible. But now if he's throwing 4 or 5 touchdowns, 5 is obviously a very, very good game, but say he throws 4 touchdowns, with all of that production, although I'm assuming a lot of yards are going to come with that as well, it's very possible that guys like Washington and McLeod also are able to benefit from that kind of ceiling performance, right? For Fields, he can have a ceiling performance without really needing anybody else. And that's not really what you're going to get from Ben. He could run for 2 touchdowns and 80 yards. And obviously, whatever he throws for is just also, nice on top, right? So when it comes down to that, I don't think you want to have such a wide pool. Probably not pairing him up with any of the running backs and his stack. So Najee's different there. Mooney and Robinson are the first two that I think of. Um, After that, like these secondary guys here, I don't know if I love that either. These secondary wide receivers. Then you have Cole Kmet. So when I think of Fields, the ones I think of are Mooney, Robinson, and Kmet. Those are the first three. Jimmy Graham's active and he's only $200. I guess he's fine as well. If he gets in the end zone, he's fine. I wouldn't say I love it, but I would say he's fine. Goodwin, Bird, and Grant, like these guys, probably not overly interested in them. So like having this stack with just these 4 guys, I think is fine. That's probably how I would approach it. So just like that, you have your quarterback stacks. So I like, quarterback rules. So now you can think about some running back stacks. You don't really need to worry about it for Najee because for Najee, there's just no other running backs that are probably going to. Well, I guess since Ballage and McFarland are so cheap, you do need to kind of worry about that. But for example, the main example I want to bring is Herbert and Montgomery. They're both so expensive. And if we get news that Montgomery is going to be the starter and be a full go, blah blah blah, you're probably just going to play him and not much of Herbert anyway because he's going to end up projecting so much better. But right now, it's kind of a cause for concern. So right now, like I'm probably just not going to play many of either of them. But let's say if we were to have Montgomery and the captain, we would want exactly 0 of Herbert. That's just saying that Monty's our captain. We need a ceiling game out of him. So we definitely don't want Herbert because Herbert probably takes away. You can also take it another step and say if Monty's in any of my lineups or any part of my lineups, whether it's captain or flex, I just don't want any Khalil Herbert. I would probably do that for tonight considering their price. And then you can flip it as well and make sure it works on both sides. All right, so now the 2 Chicago running backs are not going to be in any of our lineups together anyway, which is kind of how I prefer it right now. So those are like the 2 main rules. Or I guess they're not 2 rules, but they're 2 sets of rules: the quarterback rules and the running back rules. For wide receiver rules, I don't really think that there's a ton outside of the lineups with the quarterback MVP, unless you wanted to say, okay, if I have Deontay in my captain, then stack with exactly one of Ben Roethlisberger, right? That's a lineup, and then you can do the same thing with Claypool. Freiermuth probably won't be a guy that's in a lot of your main lineups or a lot of your captain lineups, but if he is, I would recommend doing that as well. Now the question is with Najee. For Najee, sometimes if it's a running back, like for example, Nick Chubb. I think Nick Chubb's a good example. If Nick Chubb's my captain, probably am not overly concerned with getting Baker in those lineups because if there's definitely a world where they can have big games, right? Together. Like, I mean, Baker was fine yesterday when he threw the long touchdown, but when Nick Chubb has those monster ceiling games, which is what you want out of your captain or MVP, you want to think about how they correlate with other players. So now, can Najee have a good game with Ben in the lineup as well? Sure, because Najee can catch 11 passes like he did in what was it, week 2 or week 3 against the Raiders. I'm not saying that's a likely outcome, but he can catch a ton of balls. He can catch a receiving touchdown and get it done that way. But do you need to pair him? I don't think you necessarily need to, but I don't think you need to block him out either. So, like, let's say if we had Montgomery, which I don't think this is a rule that I want to do either. But let's say it's Nick Chubb, for example. Then you could potentially say I want to stack them with exactly 0 of the quarterback. So in this case, it would be Fields, but in Chubb's case, it would be Baker. And I'm just using Chubb as an example because he's one of those running backs that really benefit on the pass game or on the run game and doesn't do much in the pass game. So now, again, this isn't a rule that you have to do, and it's not one that I would do with Montgomery, but that's just a point that I wanted to make there. Yeah, if you guys have any rules that you want to touch on through here, let me know. But anyway, we're gonna run with these rules to start because I don't really think that there's necessarily any rules that I want to use to kind of negate Najee or negate other people if I have a Najee lineup, just because I think Najee is so unique in terms of his production across all facets of the game. He's going to get tons of touches. He's going to be on the field a ton. And now when you talk about other running backs in this scenario, like let's say you wanted to play Najee. I think Najee with McFarland and Balaj, like if you're playing McFarland or Balaj, like if they end up finding their way into the lineup, it's not because like we think that they're going to have a massive ceiling game. It's because they serve as a value piece. And sure, if they do something that would be taking away from Najee, but they're just so cheap, and that would kind of be their main point of production, right? So I guess the one rule that we could do is if Najee is captain, then stack with exactly 0 of Anthony McFarland. I forgot his first name for a minute. And then Kalen Balazs. And I guess Benny Snell too, just in case he's in there. All right, so then add that rule. All right, so that rule is in there. So now we're canceling that out. All right. So now let's run a few lineups here. And then you can do certain lineups to where, if you have a core, for example, like let's say for this slate, there's a core that I want. And we'll say 2 and 3 for now, just to make the core simple. So we're going to say no matter what, we want Najee, Deontay, and let's just try to find another one here. Freeman's kind of expensive. And let's say Darnell Mooney. Like, again, like I don't know if these are actually me, like my 3 core guys or whatever, but let's say we want to stack between 2 and 3 of those guys. And you can add other guys as well. Like let's say you want Claypool, Freiermuth, Allen Robinson, and then I don't know, whatever running back you want. And you can do whatever players that you want as like your core, right? Something I like to do is for showdown. For main sites, it's a little bit harder to do this for like all of your lineups because then you're saying that you want a guaranteed amount of 2 to 3 people in the same lineup as the same kind of combinations. But for showdown, having those tight spreads kind of help out, especially for just a couple of those position spots because you're only targeting one game, obviously. So we add this rule here. And this is in all lineups. You can do a certain amount of lineups. So say you're running, I don't know, if you're running 3 lineups and you want that core in one lineup, you can do that here, or you can do whatever amount of lineups. But for this case, I'm just going to do all lineups. We're going to run, let's say 10 for now. I have to abide by community guidelines here. Artavis Pierce, I apologize. Dwayne Haskins, I apologize for giving you the thumbs down. But all right, so now we're going to run 10 lineups here. We're running in optimal mode, which I don't love. I forgot to change this. Tournament mode, projection, 2 unique players. Tournament mode, basically, I mean, if you guys have been watching the show, I've talked about it a couple times, but tournament mode is basically just going to apply a shuffle to certain players so that way we're not just clustering all of the top projected plays into the same combinations of the same lineups, right? So, for example, let's say like Najee and Deontay are the best plays on the board. We're still going to get our necessary exposure to them, but it's not all going to be clustered in with each other as combinations. So that way we can kind of ensure a little bit more diversification there while still getting enough exposure to those guys here. So now first thing you notice is kicker captain. We didn't really do anything about removing captain plays from the flag or from the player pool. But like, for example, typically I would get rid of kickers and defense from the captain player pool. So that's something that you can do just by checking them here. And then you can just rerun it here. That's a personal preference, and I didn't even get rid of Santos there just because I just don't think that they have a ton of ceilings. Like, we've seen a couple of games this year in showdowns where the kicker and the captain wins it or something like that. Don't mind playing them in the flex, and as you can see, 90% owned in the flex right now, which honestly could make a lot of sense in a game like this, especially with how some of these players are projecting. So I wouldn't necessarily rule it out, but from a captain perspective, I don't know if I love it. So here we have pretty concentrated ownership on the captain. 4 captains in 10 lineups: Najee Harris, Deontay, Ben Roethlisberger, and Darnell Mooney. So now let's make sure that our rules are set correctly and they're working. We never added the Darnell Mooney rule, which should have been. Let's see here. If we're using Darnell Mooney, stack with exactly 1 of Fields. And I don't know if you necessarily need to do this, but I would, just for the sake of using the rule, that is a rule that we could consider, right? I don't think that it's to a point where Fields is automatically going to be going off if Mooney goes off. It obviously helps, but I think with the potential low-scoring game, you don't necessarily need it. But let's run it again here and see if we get Mooney back into the captain. So he's back in, and now he's paired with Fields. All right, so we're good there. Now, Najee Harris, the only rules we set were to make sure that we didn't have any of the other running backs, and that was pretty much it. So that looks to be in order here. Good. 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 All right, cool. So again, it's going to be tough to run through and make sure all these rules are being built into each other when you're building 150 lineups. And that's why I would recommend sticking to, starting with, 10, 5 to 10, to, maybe even 20 lineups, just so that way, if something that you're doing within these rules is causing some sort of, not necessarily a mishap, but just kind of you're potentially applying some sort of restriction that the optimizer can't work with, you can see that much easier while you're building, 10 lineups or so. So these are how some of the lineups that I would build would look, obviously just on the surface here, kind of a first look scenario. I really do like Deontay and the captain. I think that Najee Harris is going to be one of the most popular captain plays. And again, we'll check on Alex's ownership later, and those will be uploaded into the optimizer as well. But that's definitely going to be, in my opinion, he'll be the most popular captain spot. Deontay could be pretty contrarian, and pairing him up with Ben makes sense. But you can also play Najee in there as well. It's kind of similar to the Cooper Kupp scenario last night, or I guess even the Jonathan Taylor scenario Thursday night, which didn't work out. But if you played Jonathan Taylor in the flex, and then played Wentz in the captain or something like that, there's just a lot of leverage there. So that's kind of the scenario that I'm thinking of. But Ben Roethlisberger in the captain spot, let's check him out. All right, so Ben Roethlisberger paired with Deontay and Najee, good. Ben paired with Deontay and Najee again, so it's clearly going to be two of the most popular plays on the board. So it's gonna be interesting to see how the captain spots shake out. But if you guys have any questions on how these lineups are looking, or if you guys want to see any particular rules, let me know. I'm probably gonna get out of here in the next 5 minutes or so, but it was good to kind of run through some of these lines with you guys. And keep in mind, the projections will be updated here shortly, and the ownership will be in there in the optimizer as well. So those all should be up there. So if you're looking to use this optimizer, head over to FTN Daily. If you're a subscriber, use it. It's there. It's included in all of the packages. So get in there. If you're not a subscriber, you can use the promo code KMER to get yourself 20% off. We have some monthly packages going on right now and all that good stuff. So whatever kind of fits your bill, get in on that. But appreciate you guys all tuning in. We were going to do some NBA first look stuff, but ran a little bit late with all of the NFL stuff. We'll be back tomorrow with a good amount of NBA. Tomorrow and Wednesday is going to be mostly NBA. So basically what the schedule is going to look like is Monday is going to be first look for Monday Night Football and also recap. Tuesday and Wednesday will be mostly NBA. Thursday is going to be half Thursday Night Football, half NBA. Friday is going to be mostly NFL lineup building stuff for the next week. So that's going to be what the schedule is looking like. If you guys have any questions or suggestions, let me know. Obviously, want to kind of tailor this around you guys as much as possible as well. So, but as of now, I think that's the schedule. I think that's going to make a lot of sense based on what we have in season right now. And obviously, things will change once football season is no longer here. But we have a long way. It's only week 9, so we had a long way to go still. But appreciate you guys all for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. Good luck on Monday Night Football. Good luck on NBA tonight if you're playing that. Tune in tomorrow for some NBA stuff. Bring your questions, bring your comments. We'll chat it all up, and we will break it all down. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Later.